You know, there's something deeply unsettling about watching someone plan their happiness. I was sitting in a coffee shop the other day, and I overheard a conversation that stopped me cold. A woman was explaining to her friend how she couldn't wait for retirement. She was 28 years old. She had it all mapped out: save for 15 more years, buy the house by the lake, then finally start living. Her friend nodded along, sharing her own 5-year plan, 10-year plan, 20-year plan. And I couldn't help but think, what are we all waiting for? There's this cruel irony that seems to define modern life. We've become so obsessed with securing our future that we've forgotten how to inhabit our present. We plan our lives with the precision of architects, sketching blueprints for happiness that always seem to be just around the corner. But here's what's fascinating and terrifying. The more detailed our plans become, the more disconnected we grow from the only moment we actually possess. Let me explain what I mean by planning your life away. This isn't about being responsible or setting goals. Those are beautiful, necessary things. This is about something far more insidious: the unconscious belief that life happens in the future, that the present moment is just a waiting room for the real thing. You see it everywhere. People who say they'll be happy when they get the promotion, when they lose the weight, when they find the right person, when they pay off the debt, when the kids grow up, when they retire. It's an endless chain of when-then thinking that turns today into nothing more than a stepping stone to tomorrow. This isn't about ambition. Ambitious people can be deeply present. This isn't about planning. Wise people plan. This is about emotional displacement, where we relocate our capacity for joy, wonder, and aliveness to some imaginary future version of ourselves. We become tourists in our own lives, always passing through, never arriving. The planning away phenomenon creates a peculiar form of time poverty. These aren't people who lack time, they often have plenty of it. They're people who have convinced themselves that their current time doesn't count, that their current self isn't worthy of the full experience of being alive. They live in a perpetual state of rehearsal, preparing for a performance that keeps getting postponed. What makes this so cruel is that it masquerades as wisdom. Our culture celebrates this behavior. We call it being future-focused or goal-oriented. But there's a difference between working towards something and working away from the present moment. One enriches your current experience, the other evacuates it entirely. The first danger of planning your life away is what I call conditional living, the belief that your current circumstances must change before you can access your full capacity for happiness, love, or fulfillment. I think about Sarah, a brilliant marketing executive I once knew. She had this beautiful apartment, meaningful work, wonderful friends, but she couldn't see any of it because she was living in the future tense. When I make partner, she'd say, then I'll finally be able to relax and enjoy things. When I save enough for that house, she'd continue, then I'll start entertaining and really living. But here's what was heartbreaking. Sarah was already living, she just wasn't present for it. Conditional living creates a strange form of emotional anesthesia. You begin to experience your current life as a rough draft, a practice run for the real thing. Your apartment becomes temporary housing. Your job becomes a stepping stone. Your relationships become placeholders. Everything becomes a means to an end, and the end keeps moving further away. The cruelest part is how this mindset trains you to be dissatisfied. When you finally reach that goal you've been planning toward, you don't suddenly become present. You've spent years practicing absence, and that becomes your default mode. So you set another goal, create another plan, and the cycle continues. Think about it like this. If you spend 10 years telling yourself that happiness lives in the future, what makes you think you'll recognize it when it arrives? You've trained your brain to look past the present moment, to always be scanning the horizon for something better. That's not a skill you can just turn off when convenient.
Conditional living also robs you of what I call micro moments of aliveness. Those small, unexpected instances of joy, connection, or wonder that happen throughout an ordinary day. When you're mentally living in the future, you miss the way morning light hits your coffee cup, the genuine laugh of a colleague, the feeling of your body moving through space. You miss the texture of your actual life. The tragedy is that these micro moments aren't consolation prizes while you wait for the real thing. They are the real thing. Life isn't a destination you arrive at, it's a quality of attention you bring to whatever is happening right now. The second danger is what happens to your relationships when you live in perpetual planning mode. You begin to treat the people in your life like supporting characters in a story that hasn't started yet. When you're mentally living in the future, you're not fully available to the people who are with you right now. You're present in body, but absent in spirit, going through the motions of connection while your real attention is focused on some distant scenario. Your partner becomes someone to plan with rather than someone to be with. Your children become projects to optimize rather than humans to enjoy. Your friends become networking opportunities for your future self. I remember watching this play out with a couple I knew, David and Maria. David was always 3 steps ahead, planning their next vacation while they were still on their current one, talking about the house they'd buy while they were still in their apartment, discussing retirement while they were in their 30s. Maria would try to share a moment, pointing out a beautiful sunset, wanting to linger over dinner, suggesting they dance in the kitchen. But David was already mentally somewhere else, calculating and optimizing. What David didn't realize is that he was training Maria to stop offering those moments. When someone consistently receives the message that the present isn't valuable enough to warrant full attention, they eventually stop trying to create present moment connections. The relationship becomes transactional rather than experiential. But here's where it gets even more complex. People who live in planning mode often attract partners who do the same thing. They create relationships built on shared future fantasies rather than shared present experiences. They bond over their plans rather than their actual lives. These relationships can feel very intimate because you're sharing dreams and goals, but there's often a strange emptiness at the center, a lack of real presence, real seeing, real being together. The most heartbreaking part is what happens when these couples finally reach their planned destinations. They often discover they don't know how to be together without something to plan toward. They've spent so much time building a future that they never learn to inhabit the present together. They're like actors who've rehearsed extensively for a play, but never learned to improvise, to respond authentically to what's actually happening in the moment. This is how planning your life away doesn't just steal your individual experience, it impoverishes your capacity for genuine intimacy and connection.
The third and perhaps most insidious danger is how planning your life away creates what I call temporal displacement anxiety, a chronic feeling that you're always behind, always catching up to a life that exists only in your imagination. When you live in the future tense, you create an impossible standard. Your actual life must constantly measure up to your planned life. But here's the thing about plans. They exist in a perfect world, where variables are controlled, where nothing unexpected happens, where you have complete agency over outcomes. Real life, on the other hand, is beautifully, chaotically unpredictable. This creates a constant state of low-level panic. You're always adjusting, recalculating, trying to get back on track to a destination that was never real to begin with. You develop what I call timeline anxiety. The feeling that you should be further along, that you're falling behind some invisible schedule that everyone else seems to be following. I think about Marcus, a software engineer who had mapped out his entire career trajectory. By 25, he'd be a senior developer. By 30, a team lead. By 35, a director. When a company restructure delayed his promotion by 6 months, he spiraled into depression. Not because he didn't like his current role, he actually loved the work, but because his reality no longer matched his plan. What Marcus didn't realize is that he had created a prison made of his own expectations. He was measuring his worth not by his actual experience, skills, or happiness, but by his adherence to a timeline he'd invented years earlier. He was living in constant comparison to a fictional version of himself. This temporal displacement creates a peculiar form of suffering. You're simultaneously anxious about the future and disappointed in the present. You're always either behind schedule or worried about falling behind schedule. You never get to experience the satisfaction of simply being where you are, doing what you're doing, becoming who you're becoming at your own natural pace. The irony is that this anxiety actually makes you less effective at creating the future you want. When you're constantly stressed about timeline adherence, you make decisions from fear rather than wisdom. You rush when you should be patient, force when you should allow, plan when you should respond. You become so focused on the destination that you miss the signals and opportunities that are actually available in your current reality. Perhaps most tragically, you miss the possibility that your actual life might be more interesting, more fulfilling, more surprising than anything you could have planned. I remember meeting Elena at a conference several years ago. She was 34, impeccably organized, and had what most people would consider a successful life. Good job in finance, nice apartment, healthy savings account. But there was something hollow in her eyes, a quality I couldn't quite name at first. Over dinner, she told me her story. At 22, fresh out of college, she had created what she called her life optimization plan. She would work in finance for 15 years, save aggressively, then transition to nonprofit work, her real passion. She had calculated exactly how much money she needed, factored in inflation, mapped out her career progression. It was impressive, really. A masterclass in delayed gratification. "The plan is working perfectly," she said, but her voice carried no joy. "I'm actually 6 months ahead of schedule." I asked her what she did for fun, and she looked genuinely confused by the question. "Fun?" she repeated. "I mean, I go to the gym, that's part of the plan, staying healthy for the long term, and I read financial blogs, research for the nonprofit transition." "But what brings you joy right now?" I pressed gently. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that broke my heart. "I don't think I'm supposed to have joy right now. This is the sacrifice phase." Elena had convinced herself that the first 15 years of her adult life were meant to be endured, not enjoyed. She was living like a monk, but instead of serving God, she was serving a future version of herself that might never arrive. She had turned her 20s and 30s into a waiting room. What struck me most was how she talked about her current self, with a kind of dismissive pity, as if this version of Elena was just a rough draft, a necessary but temporary inconvenience. She spoke about her future self with reverence, as if that woman would somehow be more deserving of a full life. "What if something happens?" I asked. "What if you get sick, or the economy crashes, or you simply change your mind about what you want?" She looked at me like I'd suggested she might spontaneously combust. "That's not going to happen," she said firmly. "I have contingency plans." But here's what Elena couldn't plan for: the slow erosion of her capacity for spontaneity, wonder, and presence. She was so focused on optimizing her future that she was atrophying her ability to respond to the unexpected gifts of the present moment. 6 months later, Elena called me. She had met someone, a musician who lived completely differently than she did. "He invited me to a concert," she said, "and I almost said no because it wasn't in my schedule. But something made me go, and," she paused, "I remembered what it felt like to be surprised by my own life." That concert didn't derail Elena's plan, but it cracked something open in her, a recognition that her current life was real life, not a rehearsal for it. So how do we break free from this cruel irony of planning our lives away? The path forward requires what I call present moment integration, learning to hold future intentions while remaining rooted in current reality. First, we must distinguish between planning and planning away. Healthy planning enhances your present experience by giving it direction and meaning. Planning away evacuates your present experience by making it conditional on future outcomes. The difference is subtle but profound. One includes the present moment, the other excludes it. Start by asking yourself, what am I waiting for to begin living fully? Whatever your answer, examine it closely. Is it really true that you can't access joy, love, or fulfillment until that condition is met? Or have you simply convinced yourself that your current circumstances aren't worthy of your full presence? Practice what I call temporal integration, making decisions that serve both your present self and your future self simultaneously. Instead of sacrificing today for tomorrow, look for choices that honor both. This might mean taking a job that pays slightly less but engages you more fully, or living in a smaller space that allows you to save money while also enjoying your daily environment. Learn to recognize micro moments of aliveness throughout your day. These aren't grand experiences, they're small instances of presence, connection, or wonder that happen when you're paying attention. The taste of your morning coffee, the feeling of your breath, a genuine moment of eye contact with a stranger. These moments aren't consolation prizes, they're the actual substance of a life well lived. Most importantly, begin to treat your current self with the same respect and care you're planning to give your future self. You are not a rough draft. You are not a stepping stone to a better version of yourself. You are a complete human being worthy of a full life right now, in whatever circumstances you find yourself. The goal isn't to stop planning or abandon your dreams. It's to plan from a place of presence rather than absence, to create a future that emerges from a rich, engaged relationship with your current reality rather than an escape from it.
And that, my friends, is perhaps the most beautiful paradox of all. When you stop planning your life away and start living it fully in the present moment, you actually become more effective at creating the future you desire. Not because you're forcing outcomes, but because you're responding authentically to what's actually happening, making decisions from wisdom rather than fear, and building a life that feels alive at every stage. The people who live most fully aren't those who have the best plans. They're those who have learned to be completely present to whatever is unfolding, while holding their dreams lightly enough that they don't obscure the beauty of what's already here. Your life isn't a problem to be solved or a project to be completed. It's an experience to be lived, moment by moment, breath by breath, choice by choice. The future you're planning for will be built from the quality of attention you bring to today. So stop waiting for your life to begin. It already has. It's happening right now, in this moment, as you read these words. The question isn't whether you'll eventually get to live, it's whether you'll choose to notice that you already are. The most radical thing you can do in a world obsessed with the future is to fall completely in love with the present moment. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. And reality, it turns out, is where life actually happens.